Hello, girls! It's Steve slash Dad, and I am here with a story today. A short story, but a story nonetheless. This story is about a princess, and her name was Wendy Tell. Now, Wendy wasn't always a princess. Wendy was born as a girl to a poor family in northern Switzerland. Now, Wendy, when she was growing up, she didn't have much because her family didn't have a lot of money. All she had was a bow and arrow that she had gotten as a present when she was 6 years old. Now, she had been playing with this bow and arrow and learning how to hunt and shoot for years and years and years. And she became really, really good with it. I mean, she could hit something super far away, like the size of a walnut, at like 50 yards. Wendy was very, very good with her bow and arrow. Now, Wendy had a rough childhood growing up. She didn't have much. Her family was always poor, and she always had to work real hard, and she blamed this on the king. Now, the king was he was a tyrant. He was an evil, evil king. His name was Gessler. And Gessler was such an egomaniac that he wanted everyone to worship him, like pretend he was like a god. So he would have his crown carried around to different towns on top of a stick with a fake head, and people were supposed to worship the crown like the crown was him, and it was meant to instill fear in the populace and make sure that everybody worshipped him. So as his soldiers would carry the crown from town to town, people would worship, but when they got to the town that Wendy lived at, Wendy refused to worship. She instead took her bow and arrow and shot the crown off the top of the stick. And it made everybody laugh, and it made Gessler, when he heard about it, real, real mad. Because he thought, goodness, if this 6-year-old girl can make people laugh at me, then she's too powerful. She must be stopped, because if people laugh at me, they're not going to respect me. So he devised an evil strategy. He went to the town where Wendy was at, and he laughed at her, and he said, "Ha, you think you're so good with a bow and arrow? Well, I'm going to take your dad and put him all the way 100 yards away from you, like where those trees are in the very far back out there, that far away." And she had to hit something as small as an apple off the top of her dad's head. Now, Wendy was terrified and angry and upset. She said, "What happens if my dad moves or the wind takes the arrow and it misses or it hits him and he gets hurt? What happens if I accidentally shoot him with the arrow?" And King Gessler laughed, and he said something even worse. He said, "Well, don't worry about that. Even if the wind takes your arrow and you miss and you don't hit the apple, then I'm going to have my soldiers hit your dad with an arrow right in the stomach, and it's going to hurt a lot." So Wendy was so mad, but she didn't know, and she was scared. She didn't know what to do. She was worried. She didn't know that if she could hit an apple that far away. She knew she was really good with a bow and arrow, but with all the emotion flying up and the king there, she didn't know if she could hit it that far under these circumstances. So before her dad walked away from her for her to shoot the apple with her arms trembling, her dad looked at her and said, "Wendy, no matter what happens, I believe in you. I know you. I know how good you are with that bow and arrow. I don't want you to think about anything. I don't want you to worry about hitting me with the arrow or missing or anything. Just relax and do your best. I don't care about the outcome." And Wendy took this to heart, and she fired the arrow, and it sailed through the air and sailed through the air, and it hit the apple and not her dad. And the whole crowd that had gathered around to watch was cheering and yelling, and and laughing and thought it was great that Wendy was able to beat the evil king's challenge. And as she was walking away, a second arrow had fallen out of her sleeve onto the ground. And the evil king, Gessler, said, "Wendy, what is that second arrow for?" And she turned around and smiled and said, "That was for, in case I missed the apple, I knew I wouldn't miss you." And she smiled and walked away. And the king, so shocked that a little 6-year-old girl could have defeated him, was unable to be king anymore. He just didn't have the respect of the populace. So he abdicated his throne, and the people, when Wendy was old enough, made her the queen of the land. And they all lived happily ever after. Now, the moral of this story was that the only reason Wendy was able to hit the apple so far away was because she was able to calm her nerves. She knew that if she wasn't nervous and didn't think about it too much, she had the ability to hit that apple. But she knew if she got up in her head and was nervous and scared and worried, her hands would have shook and she would have missed the apple. And it would have turned out much differently. So the moral of the story is always have confidence in yourself, because you are capable of extraordinary things as long as you don't get too up in your head about it. Now, I hope you girls enjoyed the story of Wendy Tell, and I will be back with another story soon. I love you both. You have a great evening. Bye-bye.